Hi, and welcome to DH226, Dental Law and Ethics. As you are seeing from the syllabus, we are taking the chapters out of its original order. I have found that doing this for the last 4 or 5 cohorts, doing it this way has proved a lot more productive for the students. What the reason that we're starting with Chapter 3 and this ADH Code of Ethics Appendix A is that it has all of the principles and values and explains what they are, and they don't do this in the book until Chapter 3 and 5 and 6, but they're expecting you to be able to answer discussion questions based on that right from the get-go. So chapters 1 and 2 are important, but we are going to take those 1, 2, and 4. We're going to take kind of at the end, and we're going to start with chapter 3 so you can have, you'll be armed with all of the nomenclature and understanding that you will need to progress in the course. So the first thing I'm going to start with is this ADA Code of Ethics, Appendix A. You'll find it on page 153. And that's the title page. And if you go flip through those pages, you're going to find an appendix code for the American Dental Association. But we need to adhere to a lot of things that they need to adhere to. So it's things that are ethical and unethical to do. So first we're going to go through some of those. I just picked a few. We'll go through others as the course progresses, and feel free to go through them yourself and hang on to this book when you get into private practice, and you can see what they are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. First one I chose was HIV positive patients, and it is unethical and wrong for any office to refuse treatment to someone who has AIDS or is HIV seropositive based solely on that fact. So we already use universal standard precautions, and we are not allowed to discriminate. And that goes as far as that and hepatitis C and A and B and anything else. The exceptions to the rule would be your herpes, which is highly contagious that way, which we would not be treating them until they were over it. And of course, COVID, I guess we need to add to everything. So dental amalgams, it is unethical and wrong, improper for a dentist to talk a patient into removing all their older amalgam restorations. If the patient is not allergic to them or nothing is wrong with the amalgam restoration, based solely on the fact that there has been a scare around about mercury being harmful. So that is unethical. Now, a dentist, obviously, it is very ethical and proper for a dentist to remove old amalgams that have not kept up. They're old and corroded and cracked and are pulled, the margins are pulling away from the tooth. Those, of course, can be refilled and should be refilled. But just if there's nothing wrong with the filling and there's nothing wrong with the health of the patient, then it's unethical to just scare a patient into thinking that now they have to take out all of their amalgams because of mercury. And that happened a few decades ago, and a lot of dentists, all of a sudden people would go in and say, I have to have, thousands of dollars worth of restorations done because I have 8 amalgams, and he's going to take every one of them out because now mercury's bad. So it was seen as a way for a dentist to make a quick buck, and anyway, that is unethical. So copies, furnishing copies. We are ethically obligated to provide dental records or copies of records to the patient if they request them. The records are really their possession. They own the records. We just house them. So we can give them a copy of the records. We may choose to keep the originals, or we make a copy and give them the original, but it actually all of their soap notes and treatment plans and x-rays are actually theirs. And if they want to see them, they can see them, and which proves another reason not to write anything personal or derogatory in your patient notes. You need to keep everything factual in your patient notes. Your patient may see those one day, but we have to provide them copies or the originals, and it needs to be given to them free or at least at a minimal fee, just covering the handling or something of the people that are providing that, but it needs to be a minimal fee, not a lot. And we have to do that whether or not the patient's account has been paid in full or not. So they could owe all sorts of money and not be paying it and being sent to a collection office. And at the same time, if they want their records, we can't hold that hostage and say, well, you pay us in full and then we'll give you the records. That is unethical. So we need to give those to them. Confidentiality of patient record. So we are obligated to obtain the patient's written permission, not just verbal over the phone. It has to be written permission before forwarding any health records of theirs or any information that contains anything of a sensitive nature, is what they call it. And what they mean is if they're have HIV seropositivity, if they're chemically dependent on something, or if they have a sexual preference, we are not allowed to give any of that information to another dentist or another dental personnel, and without their written permission. And where this comes up is if you were referring your patient to someone, you would need to have the patient's written permission to give certain information to that referring doctor. Patient abandonment. Okay, so once a dentist has taken a course of treatment with the patient, that dentist cannot discontinue the treatment without giving the patient adequate notice and the opportunity to obtain the services of another dentist. And where this comes into play is if all of a sudden a patient wants to retire, maybe he's just, and it wasn't well planned, and maybe he's just gotten sick or whatever. And so with the exception of COVID, but I mean, he's found out he has something with his liver, and he's right in the middle of a crown and bridge, a 4-point bridge or something like that, and he's in the middle of that. He can't just leave that day and not come back. He has got to give, like usually what they will do is send out a letter and say, you have this has happened. I will be retiring. I need to be away from the office, and I want to give you notice to obtain the services from another dentist. And oftentimes you need to give that patient another name to possibly go to. You can't just abandon a patient. Personal impairment is unethical for a dentist to practice, obviously, and of course, while abusing controlled substances, alcohol, other chemical agents, which affect their ability to practice. So along with that, all dentists have an obligation to urge that chemically impaired colleague to seek treatment. So, which can get a little sticky, but they have an obligation if they know it, and especially firsthand knowledge that the colleague that's down the hall in another practice, or their good buddy, or someone that's working in a co-dentist that's working in the office with them is practicing while they're impaired. Well, you have an ethical responsibility to report them to a professional assistance committee. And this isn't to get people in trouble. The first thing the dentist would have an obligation to do is to talk to that dentist and try to urge him or her to seek help. But if that dentist is not doing that and refuses to do that, then for the safety of patients everywhere, uh, you would have a responsibility to then report it. Overbilling. It's unethical for a dentist to increase a fee to a patient solely because the patient's covered by some certain dental benefit plan. This was happening long ago. I don't know, it may still be tried to be happening every now and then, but it was really prevalent, I don't know, decades ago when insurance companies became just the norm, and some insurance benefit plans would pay more than others. And so some offices were saying, well, if such and such company is paying more for this particular procedure, then we're going to up the price of the procedure. Okay, so that is unethical. It's called overbilling. No can do. Dental procedures. So likewise, a dentist who incorrectly describes on a third-party claim, usually meaning an insurance form, a dental procedure just in order to receive a greater payment or reimbursement, or they incorrectly make a non-covered procedure appear that it's covered on a claim form, is engaged in making unethical, false, or misleading representation to that third party. So that's fraud, insurance fraud, and is punishable also by law, but they can get in trouble also with the dental board for doing that also. So once in a while, maybe they would take a bite wing would pay more than a PA, but they really just needed the PA, and maybe they'd take a PA and charge for a bite wing. Whatever. So anything like that that is misleading or untrue is unethical, in a lot of cases against the law. Treatment dates. A dentist who submits a claim form to a third party, probably an insurance company, reporting incorrect treatment dates is in the wrong. It's unethical, false, and misleading representation to a third party. What would be happening is that the patient maybe they were out of a job and they just got a job, and they go to the dentist, and the dentist says, oh, we're going to do like 4 crowns, or we need to do a bridge or an implant. It's going to cost X amount of money. And the patient says, I just started this job a month ago, and my benefits won't kick in for 2 more months. So can we go ahead and do it, and you submit the form and put the treatment dates right after I get it? My insurance comes in, would that be okay? And we'll just put those dates on it so that it will cover it, but we'll go ahead and do it now, and I'll pay you something down or whatever. Okay, so that's unethical. You're not supposed to be able to do that. It's like they'll say, can you help a friend out? Or I've had patients say they need restorations, and it's up to them to decide to do that, but you can't help that along and say, okay, I'll change the dates. You cannot change treatment dates. Marketing or sales of products or procedures. Dentists should not entice their patients to buy products just because they are selling them in their office. So it's misrepresentation to be claiming that a certain product is the best if you don't absolutely scientifically know that it's the best. So the best, quote unquote, is usually up to the person, an individual person's personal opinion. And so what your best may be may not be the best for somebody else. You are allowed to, like most electric toothbrushes, even, Sonicare, Oral-B, most of them are all the same by now. There used to be, when they first started out, kind of bigger differences, but most of them are the same. They may have a few differences here and there. but you really can't say, you may not like the movement of a Sonicare moving up and down and prefer an Oral-B that moves in circles, but you can't really say that one is better than the other. If used properly, they both are equally okay. But let's say your office is selling Sonicares, and so you feel like you have to promote that. You've got to be honest and promote the use of a electric toothbrush. You can say to them, my personal opinion is that I've tried both and I like this one better, if you truly do. But you can't misrepresent products that you haven't, one, tried yourself, or that you're claiming is the best if you don't know that. Abuse and neglect. Dentists and dental hygienists, by the way, shall be obligated. We need to become familiar with the signs of abuse and neglect, and we have an obligation to report abuse and neglect and those cases to the proper authorities, and that all is consistent with whatever state that you live in. Different laws are a little different in each state. You've got to look up what your state laws are about what constitutes abuse and neglect and the avenue that you need to take. Now, saying that, I also want to say that it is the most huge injustice and just plain wrong for people to get judgy and have a knee-jerk reaction. Little kids, especially little boys, climb on everything and they bump into everything, they fall on everything, and so they may have abuse, bruises or whatever, cuts and everything all over themselves, and little girls are like that too. So you cannot, it would be a gross injustice to fly off the handle and think you need to report a case of abuse when you didn't really know what you were talking about. So this is something to where if someone's coming to you and you can tell you have taken some CE courses and you think like you can recognize and abuse or neglect, and maybe they come in 6 months and you're kind of questioning, and then the next 6 months when that person comes in, that child comes in, or a patient comes in, you notice that there's something else, and if you got that gut feeling that there really is some abuse going on, then we have an obligation to report it. The avenue that you would go is that first you would discuss it with your colleagues, with some other dental hygienists, maybe discuss it with your dentist, and make sure that you are not getting someone in trouble, because there are a lot of things to consider in that. If they get slapped with something from the state over some that you have called them in, or someone has called them in on abusive or neglectful ways, they could think that the child told you that and beat the kid up that night, or whatever night they find out. So the repercussion could be really bad. You need to make sure that this is something fairly certain that it really is something, because most likely the state may even come in and take the child away for a while until they investigate. And it would be really horrible to be taken away when it wasn't anything else. So we need to become familiar with the signs so that we can be more mindful in our judgment of this. Likewise, it would be awful to let somebody who's really being abused just keep being abused because, we're just waiting around. And so that's why you would need to have maybe even legal counsel, call the dental board, and kind of see what steps to take, etc. So rebates or split fees. Dentists shall not accept or tender rebates or split fees. Sometimes they would say, come to my practice over another practice and we'll give you $100 rebate after you start having this procedure or something like that and split fees, and that is not allowed. Use of auxiliary personnel. Dentists shall be obliged to protect the health of their patients, and by only assigning to qualified auxiliaries those duties which can be legally delegated. So that is anybody in the office. They are not allowed to give a hygienist a duty to which a hygienist is not legally qualified to do. Likewise to the assistant. If they tell the assistant to who has not had any kind of a course but maybe just worked there for a long time, and so they feel like they know exactly how to scale a tooth, and they very well may be able to do that, but maybe they can't. And so in order to nip that in the bud, they are not allowed unless they are supervised by the dentist, meaning that even when they're doing work for the dentist and finishing a procedure for the dentist, and the dentist goes off in the other room, the dentist is supposed to come back and look over that quickly and just make absolute sure that everything is okay, because they're the ones that are going to accept the responsibility for it. So we all have a scope of practice, meaning things that we're licensed to do. We can't go beyond that scope. Unnecessary services. We kind of talked about this before. Dentist who recommends and performs unnecessary dental services or procedures is engaged in unethical conduct. So if a patient, and you used to see this a little bit, a patient would come in and they would need a very simple one surface filling, and the dentist might say, oh, they need a crown. Okay, so it's unnecessary. Sometimes they may need that crown, but sometimes maybe they don't need that crown, and it's unethical to make false claims. So their ethical obligation, regardless of the type of practice arrangement or contractual obligations that they have with whoever provides the patient care, it doesn't matter. It is unethical. And so sometimes if an insurance company will say, if you come with us, we'll pay X amount of money if you have X amount of fillings or this or that or whatever type is in their practice. Suppliers could sometimes do that. I'll work a deal with you. I'll give you a discount on the amalgam if I know that you're going to give me X amount of business. A lot of that's curtailed now, but there's a lot of dentists and a lot of, I think most dentists are good guys and with a good practice, but you certainly have some that are not.